Okay, one more episode, and that's the first one that was shot.
The alligator one, yes. And the kids sent away and they got an alligator. They didn't know what to do with it. So they put it in the tank of the toilet downstairs in the basement. And the darn alligator kept growing. And we had a housekeeper, the only time we ever had her. First episode, she was fired then. I did all the work. But anyway, she was down in the basement doing the laundry, and she comes dashing up that there's a big monster in the basement. Well, that ended up that we had to take the alligator and explain to the kids, and they could go visit the alligator, and we would give it a good home at the alligator farm, and that's what we did.
That episode was called Captain Jack.
Well, Captain Jack was the man who had the alligator farm.
Now,
You know who played the part? I wish I did. Oh, he was a wonderful actor. He was in Petticoat Junction.
Edgar Buchanan?
Yes, that's who it was. Oh, you're such a help. Thank you. That's who played Uncle Jack at the alligator farm.
Now, was there some sort of problem with the network on that because you had to show a bathroom in one of the scenes? Do you remember that?
I don't think so. Maybe somebody thought. I don't remember.
I know we've covered a lot of episodes, but do you have any other particular favorites that you'd like to mention?
Well, we were talking earlier about the one where they have the horse in the garage. The kids bring it home from a circus because it's called a lying down horse, and it won't stand up. Well, the horse had to be stretched out in the garage, and the horse wouldn't go to sleep, wouldn't do that. So a vet came and gave it a shot, and the horse was supposed to then be asleep for about an hour and a half, and we could do the scenes with the horse, and then the horse would be awake. So that was fine, except the horse didn't wake up. And so there we are, shooting all day long, and that horse is sleeping all day long, and it destroyed more scenes because it was snoring. Now you can imagine a horse snoring, it's pretty loud. And when I left, about 6:30 that evening, there are 6 men holding that horse up, and that horse is still so groggy. And if they left one side, it just wilted there. Well, I left, so I didn't see how anything, and when they got the horse up and going. But what an experience. That was a bad day.
Was that Hugh Beaumont's first written and directed episode?
Did he do that one? I don't remember which ones he did, to tell you the truth.
I think it was his first one.
Oh, that's good. He did get an opportunity to do the shows, which it's so nice when they give people an opportunity that they want to do this. And here they are, they get an opportunity to write. Tony did a lot of the new Leave It to Beavers. He directed and wrote them. I won't have anything to say about the new Beaver soon.
Okay, one question about Norman Tokar, who was the main director, and that is, how did his style of directing compare with, say, the other directors on the show?
Oh, he was so much better with the children. He was so much better with comedy. He knew comedy backwards and forwards, and he could give us such great pointers. And as I say, he worked with Tony, Wally, and Wally needed the help at that time because he wasn't an actor. And no, he was the best director. I'm sorry, everybody, but he was our best director. We all loved him. He's great.
As the actors matured, how did their abilities change? How did that affect the show?
Well, first Wally's voice changed. It got deep and it would croak. And then they started, he started having dates with girls in his role. They just wrote it for a boy that was progressing in age. So that's how it was different. And of course we had different worries and different concerns about them. So we would talk to them about how you treat a girl and all this. No chance of doing anything like today. I can't believe today's television. But they're all used to it. All of you are used to it, so you accept it. But it's so different for us that played in all those shows a long time ago. There was none of that. Gee, I don't have very big boobs, but I'm telling you, when I was at MGM, they put lace in my cleavage. Can you imagine doing that today?
Now, in 1963, Leave It to Beaver went off the air.
Yes.
Why was that?
Well, there are several versions. They were going to write the show some more, and they were going to have Wally go to college. There were several versions of what they were going to do. And I think they found it difficult to write for Jerry Mathers, as he had grown into this rather awkward boy. That's what I was told by Joe, that they just thought it was better to give it up.
Can you describe that last show that you filmed for the series?
The last show that...
Yeah, can you describe the last show that you filmed? What was the atmosphere?
Well, the last show we filmed, it was a happy time and an unhappy time. You wanted to finish, and yet you were going to miss it so. And it was a show of remembrance. We had a photo album, and we looked back and said, "Do you remember this?" And then it would go to those scenes. So it was really a whole episode of scenes from all the other shows. So it was a fun episode. I had a copy of it, and I took it to a studio for somebody to see it. I never got it back. So one day maybe the Universal will give me another one.
What was the atmosphere like on the set for that last show?
I think it was a mixture. I think the kids were going on, and I was happy to stop because I had been married and we wanted to travel, but now I look back and I say, oh, wouldn't it be fun just to be able to do it one more time, just to be there one more time, and it was a happy time in my life, very happy time.
Now, how many episodes were filmed?
234.
And how many were you in?
We did 39 a year. We had 13 weeks off in the summer. Then we come back and do that again. And as you know, today, they don't make 39. Whoever heard of making 39 shows a year? They're lucky if they do 26. They're lucky if they do 12. That's why our summer hiatus is so long, where they're off and you see so many reruns because they can't afford to do anymore. And we had one sponsor. Of course, we didn't make all that money, but we made a lot of shows, and we didn't have to look at all those commercials.
What was the sponsor? What sponsor did you have?
What?
What sponsor? Who sponsored the show?
We had a typewriter. In fact, they gave us one, Remington, and we had a dog chow, and these were through, and we had no, I think that was another show that we had Clairol. No, we didn't have too many, to tell you the truth. The dog food I remember very well because I had to learn to say Wiener Rummer. I don't know if I still say it right. Because that was the dog that was in the commercial. But we have very few. The typewriter, I don't think Clairol was in that one, on the dog food. I don't remember any others.
Now, were you on every episode?
Yes, every episode.
Okay, after the show went off the air, then, what did you intend to do?
We were going to travel, and we did. We traveled all over the world and had a wonderful time. And I probably should have worked then, but I was happy to be home. I belonged to some charity groups, which I'd never done before, and I liked that. And then, I did do some. I can't say I didn't. It wasn't a whole 20 years where I did nothing. I did. But we did go back and do the new Leave It to Beaver. But in the meantime, I had done Airplane, and that really got me started again when I was a jive talking woman. And that's how I started working again. Then I worked all the time again.
Okay, before we get to that, I do want to ask you that during the 50s, it was the McCarthy era, and there was a Hollywood blacklist. Did you know of anyone who was affected by the
I
blackness?
think there were an awful lot of people affected, and I hate to say it, but Schlitz Playhouse of Stars, I don't think 4-star. But Schlitz, being beer, that was tough. They had, yes, the casting man was Frank Woodruff, and he had to check. He cast all the stars, and he had to check to see if they had communist affiliate. And if they had affiliations with the Communist Party, then they couldn't play in Schlitz. And I don't know of the other shows. I only know beer had to be particularly careful.
Were you ever asked to sign a network loyalty oath or anything like that?
Somehow I think I signed that someplace. That rings a bell. I don't know how. But I was thinking, when I was in New York and I was very young, I think that anybody could have been talked into joining that group. It sounded good. I soon learned it wasn't so good. But thank goodness I wasn't a part of it, because what if I had joined? Just, you could be innocent and join. I think Lucille Ball, she was called for a minute. I think she innocently, when she was very young, had signed up and gone to a meeting or something.
Okay, let's go back to your television. Before you did your cameo on Airplane,
Mm-hmm.
you were on 1971. You did some episodes of the FBI.
Yes, I was.
Okay. How did that come about for you?
How was it?
How did that come about for you?
I don't know. I had an agent. They called me, I guess. I don't know of any other way I get parts. So that was nice working for. Zimmer.
Ephraim Zimbalist.
Ephraim Zimbalist. Oh, no wonder I couldn't remember that. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., yes. And it was his show. And it was nice being on it. And it was nice to be back. And I did a few things like that through that time.
Okay. I want to ask you, how were you cast in that appearance on Airplane?
Well, I was cast because I'd been June Cleaver. I'm sure that was the humor of the whole thing, that I talked jive. And I was sent the script, and I thought it was the craziest script I'd ever read. And my husband said, I think it's funny. Well, my part wasn't written, really. It just said that I talked jive. So I went to see the producers, and I said I would do it. I met the two black fellas that taught me jive, and they're the ones that wrote the jive talk. And we went to lunch and we discussed this whole thing. Do you know there's even a book out about jive? And they haven't figured out. I was put in contact with a girl that worked at Paramount who knew all about jive. They've never figured out if it was the slave days that they didn't want Whitey to know what they were talking about, or whether it's street talk. She couldn't tell me. Anyway, I did research on that little part. But these fellows were wonderful, and they taught me. And then when I got to the set to do it, they could understand it. The director could understand it. He didn't want to understand it. So I had to redo it. And that made me a little nervous. Talk about relaxation. That made me a little nervous because I hadn't worked in a long time. But it all turned out fine, and they were great, these fellows. And they could rattle jive off like you have no idea. I could never get a clue as to how it was done. Like Pig Latin, you can figure that one out. Couldn't figure out jive.
How did you learn it? Did you write it down phonetically, or did you have to?
It wasn't hard for me to learn. I don't know why. It wasn't hard. Hang in your blood, and blood don't want no help, blood don't get no help. It just wasn't hard. Maybe they were good teachers.
Do you remember their names?
No. I liked them. I like everybody, I guess.
What do you think that role did for your celebrity status at the time?
Oh, I think I got as much. I went to New York to be on the Today Show because of that role. All kinds of things happened for me because of that role. So, and there were people that talked to me as much about that as they ever did about Leave It to Beaver. I got fan mail this crazy, my nephew, great nephew, he's sitting in the movies and he sees me and he suddenly screams out, Aunt Barbara! And he always tells that story. He didn't know I was in it. But no, it was remarkable. It started my whole career again.
Which brings us to the new Leave It to Beaver. Actually, in 1983, you returned as June Cleaver in Still the Beaver. That was
yeah, it was called Still the Beaver when Disney bought it. But and then Ted Turner bought it. He bought 79 shows. Whoever heard of anyone buying 79 shows? And so we made 105 shows. They were on the Disney Channel, and then they were on Ted Turner's channel. And it was June Cleaver playing a widow. How could you recast Hugh Beaumont? So I played a widow, and I had a job, but the beaver was divorced, and he came home with his 2 children. So that's where the children were in the family. And next door lived Wally, who had a wife and a daughter. And during the show, they have another child.
How did the show, when you first did the show, how did you treat the death of Hugh Beaumont, of the war
We were
character?
very, very sad when we first sat down. Well, first we did a movie of the week. The producer, Brian Levant, had been enamored of Leave It to Beaver, and his dream, he's younger than Beaver, his dream was to put us all together again. And so he sold Universal the idea of doing the 2-hour movie. Unfortunately, it was a good script. We had a director who'd never seen Beaver, and he was from Canada. Well, he'd say, oh, we didn't need this, and he'd cut that out and cut this out. Didn't turn out to be too hot. But then, after that, same man, Brian Levant, put it together that we have a new series. And so the boys were grown up. They had children of their own. I was the grandmother and a widow. We made a lot of them in Florida, by the way. We started at Universal in Los Angeles, and then most of them were made at the new Universal in Orlando, Florida. And so we were at a brand new studio. It was so clean and wonderful. It was nice. I learned a lot about Florida. I had lived in southern Florida, but now I'm in northern Florida, middle Florida. And it was good. A lot of our crew went with this too. And the scripts were good. Not Joe Gonny and Bob Mosher. And they brought it up to date. And I was a councilwoman. Don't ask me how I ran for council, but I won. And I was a councilwoman. And once Eddie Haskell runs against me, and I gave him what for, and I won.
What did you think of June Cleaver becoming councilwoman? Did you think it was a natural progression from...
Yes, I thought it was wonderful that as a widow, she didn't stay home and mope. Her children were grown, and she went out and she did something. And I think that's a wonderful example for women also. She went and got herself work, and she was out of the home doing her own thing, which I think was great. And we made 105 of those.
Do you think it...
I said that. So you hear it again.
Do you think it captured the spirit of the original series?
To a degree. It was brought up, it was 20 years, we had a 20-year hiatus. So it was brought up to date, and I don't think it was as clever as the first show. And when we started, I thought they were crazy. Why would we do this? But after I got into it, I loved it, and I had a wonderful time.
What was the audience response to the show?
It was good. Not as good as the first. Still, fan letters refer more to the original one. But we were on the network, the 3 big network stations, where this was on Disney, which is a big one, I know, and Ted Turner. So there was a difference in that, too. But I don't think it was, as much as I enjoyed doing it and as clever as some of them were. God, they were clever. And the kids were good in them. All of them were wonderful. I don't think it had quite the lasting thing that the original had.
Do you know why Ted Turner ordered so many of episodes of the series?
I have no idea, but I can remember him at Universal Studio, and he was standing up in front of a large audience that had been collected, primarily newspaper people and television people and what have you, and said how many he was ordering. And that night we saw him at the baseball game because he owned the Atlantic Braves, right? And he had our sweater on. We had given him a Mayfield sweater. I have one downstairs. It's got the stripes on the sleeve, a blue sweater with the yellow stripes like they used to wear. I don't think they're Letterman sweaters anymore. And the big Mayfield M here, and he had it on at the baseball game. And I happened to be there, and I sat. He was here, and I was here. So.
Do you have a favorite episode of the series?
Of that series? A favorite of that one. I have to think about that. I loved it when Ken Osmond, Eddie Haskell, his son played his son in the show. Both sons played his sons. One was in all the episodes where the other one was in sometimes. He and Kip Marcus, who played Beaver's son, they would play the guitar and sing, and I'm sure all the young people loved those shows. And we had even the four leads, we did some dancing and singing stuff. It was kind of fun. They did fun things. And once I can still see Eddie Haskell up there clogging with his cowboy boots on. They went all over doing this kind of thing. We even had a big fire thing because our house was on fire. Eddie Haskell had done something. That's why it was on fire. And I have a picture of me holding Hugh Beaumont's picture, Ward's picture here. So she rescued that. As we all do at a fire, we take our family albums.
Were there a lot of references to Ward made on the show?
Oh, yes, particularly in the early shows. Then at Thanksgiving, we did a show where one of Tony and his wife, Janice Kent, have this little girl. It was Kalina Kiff. And Kalina came in the kitchen, and I'm sitting there and very sad. She wanted to know why. And I'm talking about Thanksgiving and her grandfather. So yeah, we referred to him quite often. And in fact, in the movie, I go to the cemetery, and there's this marker, his tombstone thing. It wasn't one of those, it was that. Yeah. And we did miss him.
What did you do in that scene? In the cemetery scene?
What did I do when?
In that cemetery scene. It's a very famous
I was
scene.
just sitting there talking to him about the problems of Beaver, trying to get some advice from him. It's interesting.
Why did the show go off the air in '89?
That particular show?
Yeah, the new Leave It to Beaver.
I don't know. Maybe we didn't get renewed. I don't know. And then it was called still the Beaver, and then they changed it after Ted had it to the new Leave It to Beaver. I don't know which is a better name, but that's sometimes people are confused if it's a different show. It's the same show.
And then you went on to do a lot of other roles in guest starring roles after
Mm-hmm.
that. Let's talk about a few of those. I'll just name the show, and if you have an anecdote or something you'd like to say about it. Mork and Mindy.
Oh, that was fun. I played an axe murderer. I killed my husband, and that's why I'm in jail. And Robin Williams was so funny. He comes to the jail to visit his girlfriend in the show. She's in the same cell with me. And he looks at me and he says, "Why, that looks like June Cleaver." All of these things, of course, are typical of his ad-libbing. So.
Yeah, that was the episode called Cheerleader in Chains. You also, for many years, voiced the voice of the nanny on Muppet Babies.
Yes, for years. Over the period of time, it was 8 years of the time that we did it, but we were off and we'd go back and we were off and we'd go back. And we made, I know, well over 100 because Jim Henson, there was a big party. That was the only time I got to meet him. And that was shortly before he died. Such a silly death. And he was so nice. He was thanking me for being in his show. Tall man, very tall. And he had just made a deal with MGM for his Muppet Babies. I guess the whole thing is, no, not MGM. Wasn't it? Not Ted Turner.
It was Disney.
Disney. Mm-hmm. Disney.
Now, can you describe the nanny character that you voiced?
Yes, she'd say, "Children." She was always, all you saw of her were her legs, and that's the way the children saw her. They didn't see the whole nanny, and she was always there. My voice is fairly deep, and I had to always remember to put it up higher and remember, children. You know, she'd talk up higher, and her characters were just taking care of the children and sorting them out and giving them lessons here and there. And yeah, it was my only voiceover show, and I loved it. You go in the studio and you work with such interesting people. They could imitate anything. You walked in, they hand you the script. You don't study it at home. You have the script, and then you go in the studio, and you each have a mic you stand behind, and you have your script, and you start reading. And sometimes you do one line 30 times. Sometimes the whole scene is done and printed. And we didn't see the cartoon, but the director knew what the cartoon was. So our voices had to fit the cartoon characters. And these character actors, some of them only work in that kind of medium, the voiceovers. And I remember distinctly, one of the women said, one day we were reading a script, and the director said, well, that's a camel, we'll put that in later. And this girl pipes up, I can do that. She did a camel. So they can imitate, and while the camera was loading, we had more fun. They talk every kind of politician you ever could possibly know, everything, they would imitate them. It's really a fun set. It was for me, because it was up to. Now I'm going to do another one. It's only one episode, but I'm looking forward to doing my second chance at doing voiceovers.
Oh, for what series?
It's Room 403 or something like that, it's called, and it's a children's cartoon.
You also appeared on an episode of Amazing Stories.
Yes.
Remote Control Man.
Yeah, but that was Spielberg's, and he had a chance at Universal to do these various episodes, and it was called Amazing Stories. And I was in one again. I was playing June Cleaver, but I was a little goofy because I had a different ward, and I had Coleman, the little black boy. He was Beaver. And there was a man that was Wally. It was crazy. It was like, only not as good as Rod Serling. Rod Serling was a poker partner of all of us. We had fun. They was a nice man. I'm sure you all know who Rod Serling was.
We'll ask you on the next tape.